Yeah, honestly, I was expecting that they would have already had the cameras rolling, but hey.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we
Mm-hmm.
are interviewing CCH Pounder.
Hi.
Hi. And so I guess a little bit about yourself, that you've been in various movies. You have a career spanning several decades since 1979, and that you are currently playing Dr. Loretta Wade on NCIS New Orleans.
That's
But
it. Yeah.
but of course, these are things that everybody knows. But we'd like to go beyond that and really to know a little bit about you. And
That would be great.
yes.
I know it's important because there's always a new audience somewhere. So CCH Pounder, Carol Christine Hilaria Pounder, born Kitty, grew up at Versailles Estate, went to Sacred Heart School and Mrs. James's kindergarten, and then left for England. Then later on went to America. And I was for a while the only child that kept coming back to Guyana, sort of once every decade I would come. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I was in a convent school and somewhat isolated in England. And so I really wanted to make a connection with my roots. And I obviously didn't feel it in America. I hadn't been there very long. And I felt the memory of Guyana was so strong of Versailles Estate. But I think that's what started it. And I have to say, I've been really privileged because I was able to bring my mother, my husband, my brothers and sisters on different trips.
Wow.
And now this time I'm here with my youngest sister who was born in America with her daughter. And she's only heard of Guyana, heard my parents obviously by their accents and stuff like that. And now she has a solid connection
Yeah.
to her ancestors.
Wow. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that must really be an experience for her.
It's a wonderful experience. It's really just to watch the kind of go, oh, that's what that was, and that's where that came from, and so that's the terrific part.
Yeah.
It also happens to be a wonderful occasion to come to. So the country is sort of enhanced, and it's a special time, and the sense of nationalism and the hopeful time that's here, and people want to move forward. You can feel it in what they're talking about, and the fact that they came in to see how it's going was also kind of wonderful.
Yeah. And it's definitely, I guess you mentioned that feeling of connection that
Yes.
I know, especially being first generation, that it is coming back here, you do get that experience, and it does, I guess, illuminate some things from your childhood, or to make that connection, a deeper understanding of essentially of yourself and where you come from. So I think I can definitely identify with that feeling.
You know, there are lots of really incredible things that you see in your parents, and you go, oh my gosh, they're so hard, they're so this, they're so difficult, they're so forceful about things. And then you come here, and you actually see what a slither of what their lives might have been, was, could have been, and you see what it is that made them who they are. And I think it changes everything for you. You kind of, it opens up your brain and you understand them better. And so this is one of the things that I think is unraveling in our group that's here. It's a wonderful cross-section of people who have a Guyanese attachment, either parents, they went to school here, their parents were from here, and it's an intimate group of people, and I would say we're all friends, or we know each other through another person in the group, and to watch each one unfold, learning more about themselves or their parents, or how it came to be that they got to, Canada, America, England, wherever. It's been really a wonderful, I would say almost spiritual trip in a funny way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that is also a feeling that I can identify
Yes.
with. That it does definitely bring a deeper meaning. Again, a deeper meaning and understanding to everything that's going around, and especially at such a time in which national pride does feel at like an all-time high. Like
It does. You just pray and you hope that the powers that be don't mess up that sense of national pride by divisions and this one's better than that one, and if they could come down off of the ivory tower and just walk through the streets and get a listen of the sense of possibilities now, I think they might be less clannish,
Yeah.
less sort of, well, we do this and we did it that way. And so I keep my fingers crossed that they propel hope into real possibilities.
Exactly. And I also know, which is a very interesting observation, I was reading through some records, and it says about 80% of Guyanese citizens are under the age of 49.
Wow.
Yes. So that's amazing to think that a majority of this nation was not even here during the fifth, or when.
They have no clue.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it really brings us to, I would say, a time in which we have to, the theme was, of course, to reflect and to inspire,
Yes.
to agree, and I feel like that's needed now more than anything, and especially when you have diasporic community.
Yes. Now, it's funny that now that you say that and I'm listening to that, and if they're at 49, so the struggles that, say, my parents have is now for them just sort of recent history.
Yeah.
And therefore, they have a great opportunity to start with a clean slate.
Yeah.
And to make themselves Guyanese as opposed to Afro-Carib Indian Guyanese, always with a... But to become Guyanese, I think this is... A lot of people think that 50 years is a long time. It's the beginning of a nation. And it takes this kind of struggle and all the things and the different parts to become one. It takes a while. It's like a marriage.
Yeah.
It might have been a 5-minute honeymoon, but you're with her for a really long time.
Yeah.
It gets like, So to have it really fit in place and work beautifully, my friend was saying to me, do you think there are any examples of that where a country has struggled with all these sort of many different nations that have come together to become a country? And there's not much of an example of it, except for perhaps the United States. Canada is working on that. It's becoming more open. But it'll be really interesting to see our own experiment and how brilliant we become about loving each other and supporting each other's very, very different looks, ideas, faiths, all those things. It takes quite a bit for all of that to come together to make a magnificent nation. So let's hope we can really pull it off.
Yeah. So I must ask you then, what does being Guyanese mean to you?
Well, for me, I think in a very, very basic sense, it was the country that I was allowed to hold on to. So in America, where you from? What are you doing? Girl, what's up? I'm Guyanese. And then that just opened up a conversation of a place that I could stand from. In England, where are you from? What are you doing here? Why are you here? I said, well, I'm Guyanese. And, and I could explain myself. So I always had something to hold on to, even for somebody who left at 8 years old. And I, particularly in my family, needed it. And there are others, they're American, they're British, they're fine. But some of us have to look back. So I'm a Sankofa-ized person.
Yeah.
And I look back and I see Guyana and I see its hurts, its potential, let's fix that. And the fact that there's so much of us out in the diaspora and that we haven't sort of thrown our attention over there and say, when was the last time you came back? What do you have to offer? And I always think of people who are in their sort of 55 to 65, that what I call the legacy ages, of who've gone abroad, have been successful in their field, and how can you encourage them to share their knowledge? Come back, lecture, participate, what? And I think it could be an outreach problem where we don't have a department that says, come back, take a look at, UG.
Yeah.
I drive through the grounds and I'm going, wow, what happened? And I see the potential of everything, literally everything being better. So, um, and I see a lot of wasted energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if that is a typical observer because you're, do you know, like when you're outside and you go back in, I always think of my home. I thought it was this enormous place that I would run to get to my father's room with if I had a nightmare. And then I saw it the other day, little kanchy-manchy, little beautiful, little cute little cottage. It's like, wow. And perspective comes together. And then you realize that, okay, it's now that we're grown, we should be able to handle some of these things.
And so you said that being Guyanese, it's your link with your culture, and that you're able to
Absolutely.
essentially to hold on to that, as you said. So I know this is a problem that I often run into, and I wonder if you do as well. It's that when you tell people that that Guyanese, that do they ask you, well, like where's that? Do you mean Ghana or
Very few people know where Guyana is.
Yeah.
And if they do, the reference is Jim Jones. And I
Yeah.
always say, the longest drop of water in the world is in Guyana, Kaito Falls. And it's always a teaching moment. Everyone wants to know whether you're from Guinea, Ghana,
Yeah.
and I'm married to an African, so obviously I'm definitely from Ghana or Guinea. But yeah, it hasn't created a specific nugget that people go, Guyana. And to me, when I look at all of the CARICOM nations, it has in potential the most to recognize, certainly in ecotourism, certainly in timber and lumber, or obviously it doesn't have the spirituality of, say, the reggae music, which is now worldwide. I mean, Jamaica has slayed us in many, many ways. It's a closer country to visit from a lot of places. Its music is exquisite. We have other things that will blow your mind. To see a harpy eagle is the most extraordinary thing. To see, to go to the Kaito Falls, to stand on that edge. You probably have about 2 more years before they cordon it off. But I've heard recently there have been jumpers, and that's an unusual thing. But just the most amazing looking places that even the Guyanese haven't discovered because we tend to stick to the coast. But to go in and really see this land, I think it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah. It's definitely an experience. So
I know you haven't gotten in there yet, so.
No, not yet. I hope so. I hope to soon.
Yeah.
But and I'll definitely record, I guess, my ventures in there as well.
It's amazing.
Because because of just exactly what you said, that there are some Guyanese who don't even realize that just the natural beauty that even exists within the nation.
It's a very beautiful country.
And so you said that you visited several times throughout your life, that you come back and you try to maintain a connection. Is that just for personal connection with your family, or?
It was. I would say that I had probably a very typical immigrant childhood where your parents move from their land, they go to another place, and then it all becomes about work, work, work. And I ended up in a convent school in England, and this kind of disenfranchised, highly educated, but no heart connection person, I needed to find my heart. And I found it by coming back to Guyana with my mother and saying to her, I don't know anybody here. You show me your Guyana. And in that walkabout that we had, I actually began to understand who she was, what made her what she was. And after that, I could open up my heart to her. And so Guyana for me was a heart connection.
Wow.
And so I'm very appreciative of that. Yeah.
So that really does sound like an experience. And I can genuinely say that I feel a very similar connection to the country. So I mean, that's
Great.
what brings me back, and I guess why I'm here now.
You know, I really feel, George, that there's going to be a sort of a shift in many countries where their children went forth into the lands kind of because it was political turmoil or, you know, change of regime, whatever reason they left, financial, you know, the lines are still long at all the passport offices. People still have a feeling that the grass is much greener, and then how dare you suggest that it's not, because you already went there, and I want to be able to do that too. But once that opportunity has come and you get a chance to see it, I know so many people who actually wish they could come back, but perhaps they went off with the idea that they were going to Western glory, and life is rough. Life didn't happen for them, and what they wanted didn't happen for them, and they feel sort of ashamed to come home, and yet all the knowledge that they acquired, the skills that they acquired, these are viable things. And they always say that it's, you know, for me, an actor is a dime a dozen where I live. You can walk down my street and nobody will go, oh my God, there she is, because there's one.
Yeah.
Hollywood is, you know, it's full of actors, want to be actors, had been actors, all those things. And then there are other places that you go where you're rarely seen. Like, you know, I work in New Orleans, and in New Orleans it's like, truck stop in the middle of the street. Oh my God, yeah. And it's a very different reaction, and it's kind of a similar thing that when you come home, where we don't get a chance to see each other. And one of my heart moments was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're Guyanese. You're Guyanese? But the idea that success and Guyanese don't go together, I want to change.
Yeah.
I really want to break that, because Guyanese does mean success. And as much as I've traveled, been in Russia, China, there's always one Guyanese person like, well, what are you doing here in the middle of Russia? Oh, I'm teaching at the University of Odessa. You know, there's always these shock points that we are kind of like the Senegalese. We're like these sort of world travelers. You find yourself in Tahiti and in Australia, and you're doing things or bringing information that is appreciated there. And you always hope that one day, I always hope that one day, that those people will get a chance to come back to Guyana and, you know, drop some good information here and lay some track here.
Absolutely. And I mean, it'll definitely be wonderful to see, especially because of it's interesting that there's such a wide diaspora considering just the size of population of it's
Yes.
such a small country. But
Such a small country, not 1 million people, but doing a lot of things.
Yes, and everywhere. There are even in New York politics. You have guys.
The mayor.
Yes, even the mayor. Exactly.
Mayor of New York, New Jersey.
So yeah, so you genuinely have such a, like, we're out there, and you know, and it would definitely be wonderful to see some more come back. So I guess would you say that you're part of this movement to try to bring people back, or?
I think I'm actually even doing it sort of unofficially, where it's nothing set in stone. I don't have that kind of a job where I'm free to do and travel like that. But just in terms of my conversations, in terms of when the opportunity arises, is to go full out and go all the way. It's like beyond talking about it, we're going to get on a plane and we're going to come on over. And so my friends like Frank Roman put this all together, this trip, so that we could, each one of us, have a very intrinsic and unique Guyanese experience. I think if you talk to the 9 people in my group, completely different experiences. We're all going to the same places.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where have you taken the group so far?
We had an amazing time in Arrow Point. So a real connection with nature, and to not be afraid of it, because I think the idea of going into all this bush and trees and these beautiful creeks is it can be very intimidating. And with good guidance, we had this amazing time. And we went to Paraika, we went across the Essequibo to Suriname Charity, and we even went down to Mainstay, which is a sort of resort-like area, on an empty day, and it was delicious. You know, just sitting on those steps, having your foot in the water, and relaxing with a good roti and curry. It was delicious. We have done the kind of what would consider very typical. You know, we've walked through Stabroek Market, we've looked at the churches. A lot of us are fascinated by the age and the beauty of these wooden houses that we have, and you know how we can protect them. And I am not sure, but I do believe that Guyana has the cachet of wooden houses. It could be the greatest variety and look. I think we've got it. And I know not everyone can be on the National Register, but I think if people are interested in saving them, it would be so lovely that they could get the help. Like if some DIY help, some just expertise in historical houses would be great.
No, absolutely. And what I find is so interesting about it is that it really seems like one of the few locations I would really say where you see such a combination of various different styles, because
Yes.
homes, like I know I would see that one house would have a British inspired
Yes.
look, and then you have another one you'll see it'll have a Portuguese style veranda. You know, you have another house, it would be a
There's
Dutch
even a version
elements.
of like mid-century modern here. It's like
Yes.
Californians would be like, how did they get that? It's completely different, but it's suddenly similar. And I thought, wow, yeah, there's a lot of right in your face things that are overlooked.
Yeah.
It's like we're sitting right here. We're here, but they're overlooked. Yeah, but there's some also marvelous things. Like we watched a beautifully cleaned out mall the other day, and we see that they're working on that. I went to the CARICOM building, and I was so blown away by the lilies in their trenches, the beautiful flowers, fantastic landscape. I said, wow, I would have to steal that gardener. They're beautiful work, so that we know it's here and it's doable. So it's just ducats,
Yes.
just ducats,
And
they're conscious, to be conscious about it. Yeah.
yes, and I know that just seeing just the beauty of this place, it's definitely something that I feel needs to be shared with the world.
Yeah, you know, I guess because I have been living in New Orleans for a while, I am in a post-Katrina New Orleans where there is rebuilding, there is abandonment, there is, you know, all the ferns growing out of the top of the roofs. Everything that is here is there, and you kind of watch them sector by sector sort of cordon off and fix. And Katrina was 10 years ago.
Right.
It takes a moment, and I think either I've arrived at the old age where I understand the beauty of patience, but it really does take a moment for things to get fixed, and you have to sort of accept that in one swoop it can be wiped away.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like keeping that incredibly hopeful mindset that all this can change. Literally. You just can't do it alone. So we need to just band together, and you take that square mile and make it fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so prior to this, you had mentioned that you consider yourself an activist as well.
I do.
Yes. Can you please tell us a little bit about your activism?
Well, I'm of that age where to see a black person on television was like, wait a minute, turn off the pots, come, look, somebody black is on TV, and that was a huge thing. And because of it, I would say I didn't start off as an activist per se, but things like this happened. In the very beginning of my career, I played a lot of victims, a lot of crying people, a lot of my husband kidnaps me, I sell my baby for crack cocaine. I had these just horrendous roles, very, very poignant, very impactful. And I think the day that I heard, that's the way they are, I realized the power of television.
Yeah.
And when people see a play, they see a TV show, non-reality, somehow or other, it seeps into their system and becomes reality. And so I stopped working for about 1.5 years, and I said, I won't play any roles unless there are women in a position of authority who have a sense of themselves and a backbone. And at that time, LA Law had just come on the market. And I said, and I will not work up to 1 year. Literally, I didn't work for 1 year because I kept getting the roles of the victim. And at the end of the year, I got a script from LA Law for yet another victim, and I was like, oh, gosh. But as I was reading, there was a judge, male, white, and I told my agent, I want to go in as the judge. And they were like, what? You gotta, don't break this. You haven't worked in 1 year. And I said, I want to go in for the judge. And because I had worked so well before, I think they kind of sucked it up and went ahead and said she wants to do the judge. And everybody was like, oh, damn it. I suppose we just better see her. And I did it, and they all went, oh my God, she could really be a judge. And I think I spent the next 5 years being like firefighter chiefs and head of this and head of that and judge and lawyer. And I would constantly keep a roster of real African heritage judges, lawyers, doctors, and I would just give them dossiers. Of course I can. They exist in real life. Here is a bunch of doctors from Boston, from New York, and I would do my homework and get in that way. And then on top of that, I think a lot of people think I have a very authoritative voice, and so that also helped me. It is a sacrifice that I did because it also means that as the actor and artist, you have to squelch all of the mad people you'd like to play, all of the nasty, cussing, hand-on-hip people that you'd like to play, for this to seep through. And then once it seeped through, you would see now, oh, there's another judge. There's another one. And you'd see all these different roles of authority. And that begins the process of activism because you realize your responsibility even in the form of an artist who would like to be free. I think the one great thing about artists is freedom of expression. And sometimes the medium that we're using here, this television medium, doesn't offer that without a caveat that whatever you do will affect someone somewhere. And then you have to, pick your battles. And sometimes you've played enough judges that, a couple of wild women here and there, hand on hip, smoking, cussing. It's kind of like, oh, she did that as well. And then you become an actor again, as opposed to, oh, that's the way they are. And so to try and change that in my lifetime that was offered, I feel like I got from point A to point B. And so I'm really pleased now that even when I hear catchphrases like, she's the soul of the show. She doesn't speak, but she looks stalwart and educated. Before I used to get mad, now I go, oh, that sounds wonderful. And then you get into the program, and then you change it. Then you make it your own. then you put your own stamp on it. And so the sense of that activism is what started working with Nelson Mandela. I worked for Artists for Free South Africa. We went to South Africa. We gathered information. We spoke to factories, 7,000 people. We saw through acting, one man, one vote, that you're allowed to do it. Then in factories of thousands, we'd pick an 18-year-old and the oldest person. They would walk forward and basically practice the art of voting for those first elections. So I'm very proud to have been part of that. I was with Fidel Castro, with the American government, when they were first starting their forays, it's about 15 years ago now, of just opening talks. Let's see what it was. And you think, well, what were you doing there? And so what they have is what they call a strange bedfellow. So you've got a bunch of politicians, and then you've got a singer or an actor. I know Bono went one year. I went another year. And so when there's tension in the room, they would say, well, you know, Miss Pounder's last film was da-da-da. Did you see? And it would break up the tension in the room.
Yeah.
And in your own way as an artist, you got to participate in what makes a country tick. And you actually got to be part of that, not being a politician and just being the craft that you have to offer. So I realized that you don't have to become anything else. You don't have to now go to political science or whatever, but whatever you are within your craft, it can actually expand into other things. And so an activist is now part and parcel of what I am. And in the process of sending children to school, for instance, Tanzania, we were able to bring a young lady who had been hacked. She's albino, and you know, in certain parts of Africa, they sell the albino children for muti, or good luck charms, and they hacked her fingers. And we were able to bring her and her sister, and they're in the process of being put back together. And so we got her a new leg, got her fixed her teeth. Tiny little steps everywhere. It doesn't really matter what it is, but I always say just choose something. And it can be very small. Educate one child. You know, bring a child into your family if you've got the room. These are all things that make activists. You don't need a desk and an office or a nonprofit organization to do it.
So essentially, by, I guess, responsibly applying your craft, that you were able to truly help others through that.
I feel that that's what I've done, and I feel other people can do it. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of it, sometimes, is just having the courage to speak up.
Yeah. So would you say that that's something that's important as not even just an actor, but just for any sort of artist, should also have that element about themselves?
I don't want to say should, but it would be lovely if they did.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And wow, but it sounds like, what was that like, the experience to be able to work with so many, I guess, so many leaders? Like that
had
must
a
be
moment, you know, where you always think, my goodness, I think I'm about to die, because you look at these little photographs, and it's like you see yourself with Bill Clinton, and you see yourself with Mandela, and you see yourself with Fidel Castro, and the government. My husband's from Senegal, and I was with Abdou Diouf there, and then you're talking at the United Nations. I did the emceed for the 100 years of slavery, the celebration of how long it had been at the United Nations. So you're at the General Assembly, and you keep saying, "No, I'm an actor. You know, like an actor," and it's pretty extraordinary as time passes that the thing that you are can still take you to places that the last place you expected to be. And there's great appreciation. I think my greatest moment, just as like, oh, I am appreciated, is I had a Grammy nomination in a group, and Hillary Clinton was in the same category. And everybody said, the First Lady is not coming to the Grammys to not win. Why bother to get on the plane? And I said, because, well, I have a nomination. Come on. And I went with my friend. It was the first one up. She won. She went back to her state dinner, flew back to her state dinner. And my friend Standish Benton said to me, come, let's go backstage. And as I went backstage, the first person I saw was Gladys Knight. She went, I love you! And then I saw Jessie Norman. She said, oh, my darling, you're wonderful. And here I was amongst peers of another section of art that absolutely appreciated my work.
Yeah.
And so it made me realize that what we do, regardless of what umbrella we're under, whether it's theatrical or visual, affects people. This is an incredibly powerful medium.
Yeah.
So what we do affects people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when would you say was the moment where you considered yourself more than just an actor?
Ooh. Definitely in South Africa, definitely with Nelson Mandela. And I remember the dinner we had, and it was quite a spread. It was at the old hotel where the ANC used to meet, and we had this incredible spread. My plate was piled high, and Mr. Mandela came in the room. He was Mr. Mandela at the time, before president, and he sat down and he had 2 little pieces of fish and 1 spoon of rice. And I thought to myself, wow, there's discipline, incredible discipline. And it gave me the courage to, at that time, for him, this is the man I want to support and follow. And what that requires means that I'm going to go through with it. I'm going to go through all the Secret Service stuff, all of that. I'm going to go through with it to be part of that dream to abolish apartheid. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I guess, what was the feeling like to be there during?
It was exhilarating. I was on cloud 9. And I think for years I had a picture of him and myself that said, some years miracles really do happen. I think that was my classic Christmas card for about 5-6 years. Yeah.
Would you say that's probably the first time you felt maybe starstruck, so to speak?
I wouldn't want to use the word star, but yes. Yes. Luminary.
Yeah.
Really special people in the world. This was a special man in the presence of absolute power.
Yeah.
Self-preservation power. It was really amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, would you say that, well, you did say that you had a year in which you weren't acting.
Right.
And that was mainly to try to essentially reinvent yourself as an actor to
Yes.
understand your responsibility and your roles. So, was there any point in that time where you kind of felt like, well, is this even worth it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a lot of doubt.
Yeah. And I guess, so what was really the thing that helped you to keep going?
Every bad script that came through, I kind of went, okay, here we go again. If it wasn't Guyana, I don't think I would have had a sense of self that was not so easily bendable. I arrived in Los Angeles with this face, of course, many decades younger. Girl, you gotta wear lipstick when you go to the supermarket because somebody might spot you. You beat your face. And I'm going to the supermarket, and even then, I didn't feel the need to do anything other than this face. And I remember I had a wonderful friend, Alfre Woodard. She's a wonderful actress. And she said to me, I'm going to take this face, black, and shove it down the throats of America, and they are going to love me. And they did.
Yeah, seemed to work.
In post, it did. But it was a sense of self that I recognized, as opposed to, oh, maybe you should shorten your chin a little bit and tighten your nose. There are all these things that all women, by the way, this is not germane just to the African. This is any woman going to Hollywood. You gotta really have some cojones. You have to be strong on the inside. Otherwise, everything will change you. The impression of who you are, how you speak, what you look like, how you walk, all of these things are changeable. And if you don't have a sense that, yeah, but if I change that, and that, then I start to look like her, and her, where is my individuality? And to hold on to who you are as an individual person is challenging.
Yeah.
And so it is really wonderful to have been to a place like this, who tell you, who you are.
Yeah.
And you have it at a very, very young age, so that when you arrive anywhere, regardless, you feel a sense of, well, this is who I am. And so I had it.
And so Guyana really
Guyana
made you
power.
who you are. Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
And obviously, other things. I had wonderful, loving relationships and a sense of preservation and a sense of self, and whatever map I came with that God gave me, whatever map that said, well, until she's influenced by, she does this, that, and that. She's hard-headed. She's whatever. Yeah. Determined. Whatever. There's something in there that's individually me.
And so, I guess Guyana is essentially what made you, and I know that you've had many experiences outside of Guyana as well. So I guess I would ask, what about you do you feel that you can really bring back to Guyana? Or that you even do currently bring back to Guyana?
Yes, but I understand the question, and I think there's a romantic sense of what I can bring back to Guyana. And then because I'm a Capricorn, I'm incredibly practical. And there's the other part of me that says, I don't give anything just because I think you'll like it. I sit down and I said, George, what would you like? And then within that perhaps I can fit in there or there or there. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is to not come bringing gifts that you don't necessarily need. And I think a lot of people should listen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, are there any thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Besides the fact that I think one day I will find a wooden house that can be fixed from stem to stern, the fact that I've had the privilege of just bringing family back has been really thrilling for me. And I think that I see potential, and I am not rosy glassed, the girl with the rose glasses, whatever. But I see incredible potential, and maybe because I've been in some places where you wouldn't believe the things that are lacking, and yet life goes on, things get done, things work on a certain level. And so I feel very hopeful for Guyana. I think as a 50-year-old baby, in terms of a country, this is a baby. I think that she's on her way to being a really pretty spectacular toddler.
I'd like to think so as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for
George.
speaking with us.
Okay, great. Good.